Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrea Diaz, and we are here, right, day two. We are here with the fantabulous Antionetta Kelley, who is a principal grant writer. I hope I'm saying it along those lines properly. She will correct me because trust me, she is really good at what she does. And when I tell you that you just have to listen to her because she's so humble. She doesn't even know how fire. I always tell her she doesn't know how fire she is. She's beyond. She's too smart for her own good. And she. Okay, so you got me started, Antonetta. This is why someone put myself on mute and get out the shot so I can let you do your thing. Okay,
No.
ladies and gentlemen, I introduce the principal and founder and owner of the Right Consulting Group, Miss Antonetta Kelley.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Andrea, for having me here. My name is Antionetta Kelley. I am the principal consultant, founder, president, and CEO of the Right Consulting Group. We are a boutique proposal management firm based in Washington, D.C. We help clients across the nation. We have helped clients, including small businesses and nonprofits, raise over $1 million in funding to support their missions. And we're really excited to be here. I personally have over 10 years of grant writing experience. I'm originally from the Boston, Massachusetts area. I went to Smith College for undergrad and the Harvard Graduate School of Education for grad school. And so it's really a pleasure to be here and to talk to you all about how to successfully manage grant opportunities. So today we're going to be talking about just that. I've got 5 different ways that you can leverage grant opportunities, hopefully for your small business, your nonprofit, or whatever type of endeavor you are pursuing. So let's get started. Okay, so the areas that I'm going to cover in today's session are 1, market research, 2, outlining, 3, narrative crafting, 4, submission and tracking, and then 5, reporting. And I want to first start the conversation off about what a grant opportunity is. So I pulled this definition from the grants.gov website, and grants.gov is the federal platform that organizations use to find and solicit grant opportunities. So here they say that a grant is one of many different forms of either public or private assistance that is used to fund ideas and projects that provide services and help stimulate the economy. Overall, a grant is free money. If I had to just kind of put this definition in basic terms, a grant is free money that comes from either a public source, the government, or a private source. And it's money that does not need to be repaid back. And it's money that you can use on a variety of different expenses that you have either in your small business or your nonprofit. Here I have a list of different grant categories that are pretty common, but the list can get pretty extensive. So, but these are the most popular ones. And those are education reform, workforce development, women's rights, juvenile justice work, around health and wellness, veteran support, housing reform. The list could go on and on and on, but these are generally the types of categories and areas that I work with and that show up a lot in my line of work. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about grant eligibility requirements. And first and foremost, what you'll see primarily is that nonprofits that have that 501c3 designation are eligible to receive grants. But contrary to popular belief, if you have a startup or a small business, there are a number of startup grants that invest in startup capital for your small business. Similarly, if you have what's called a social enterprise, and that is an entity that is for profit, but is doing some good on behalf of the public, you are entitled to grants as well. And there are opportunities out there for you. You may run an institute of higher education. You may do some sort of vocational or technical training, and you may even be entitled to grants, or even a faith-based organization, a church, or some sort of affiliated organization could get grants. And then even a government agency, and typically we see government agencies giving out grants, but then they also receive grants as well. Okay, so now I'm going to cover the first area that you would delve into when you are looking for grants, and that is market research. So I have here 4 different points about market research. The first being that when you're doing your research, you can go directly to the source. So there may be a foundation or a government agency that you're already familiar with that you know you want to work with because they may have a mission that is similar to your mission. So I always like to say, if you've already pinpointed such an entity, go directly to the source, check out their website, look under their grant opportunities and see what they have currently available. Another tool that you could use are third-party search sites. So one I mentioned earlier is grants.gov. It's federally run, it's free. You don't have to pay to look for those opportunities. But then there are some that do require a paid subscription, such as GrantWatch. And GrantWatch is actually a tool that I use for myself and for my business. It does require a paid subscription. However, I like the tool because you can aggregate your searches by category, by city and state, and you can get really narrowed down in specific searches, and they are viable, unlike other websites that you may come across. The other thing I like about GrantWatch is you could use it for the day. They have a subscription for the day. They have weekly subscriptions, monthly subscriptions, and annual. So you can kind of, use your discretion to determine what would be the most beneficial to you. Once you have gone to these sources and pinpointed opportunities of interest, you would do what I call opportunity forecasting. And so that is essentially putting together like a pipeline with the details of these grant opportunities that you found. So you would, put the name of the grant opportunity, the amount of the award, the deadline, the specific category funding area. And then once you've got that information in front of you, you would go through what I like to call a go, no-go process to determine, is this grant scope in my wheelhouse? Is it related to my mission? Is the deadline reasonable and realistic? Can I meet the deadline? So you'll make those decisions and then you'll have a few opportunities outlined that you want to go after. Okay, now once you've got the opportunity in front of you and you've decided, yep, this is what I want to pursue, then you want to get deeper and do a deeper dive into the opportunity. So what I like to do is study the RFP. RFP stands for Request for Proposals, and that will contain all of the details about the grant, the period of performance, the scope of work, the award amount, what you need to do to submit the grant application, what's required. And so really study the RFP with a fine-tooth comb, go through it, highlight it, and really understand it so that when you're putting together your proposal, you know that you're covering all bases. When you're doing your outline, and the purpose of an outline is to really get your thoughts organized because these RFPs can be pages and pages long. I've seen RFPs up to 100 pages long, especially if it's for a government grant. So an outline is really going to help you, get your thoughts organized and just keep you coordinated and together. So once you've studied the RFP, you're going to, go to Word, for example, start a new Word document and create section headers based on what's in the RFP. Then once you've done that, what I like to do is start working on the budget. And I'll talk a little bit more about the budget in another slide. But basically the budget is going to be very important because it's going to tell you, it's going to paint a picture for what you can realistically get done with the grant and the award amount. So, that's going to have like your personnel categories, non-personnel categories, things like travel, indirect costs, things of that nature. And so I think that that is important to get a head start on that even before you start writing your narrative. Then in your outline, what's also important is that you start to identify any appropriate partners that you're going to be working with, collaborating with, and past performance examples. And I like to get that part done in the outline before I start writing the grant because it can be very time consuming. And a lot of times, with these grants, what makes them very strong is if you're going to be collaborating with other like-minded organizations, and it's going to take some time to get those commitments. So I would start working on that on the front end. Again, before you start writing, reach out to that nonprofit that you want to work with, or that other company that you want to work with, get their commitment and their support so that you can already have that portion in your outline. Similarly, for past performance examples, that is something that if you don't get on top of it before you start writing, you can get really hung up on it on the back end. So, and a lot of times these RFPs are going to require you to have at least like 3 examples of past performance, which would include, what company you did the work with or organization you worked with, what the award amount was, and things of that nature. So you want to make sure you have that down. Then what you want to do is set an internal deadline. So generally, when you're getting grant applications, a lot of times the deadline is right around the corner. I like to try to work on things at least 30 days out in advance. And then I like to set my deadline at least 7 days before the actual deadline. And then that usually gives me time to review, what I have, put last minute things together, and just make sure that I'm giving myself enough lead time before the actual deadline. Next, what you want to do is solidify submission requirements. So what this means is that, a lot of times when you're submitting these grant applications, you could be submitting it through a portal, or you could be submitting it directly via email to a point of contact. What I normally see is that you have to submit through a portal. And if you're doing a federal grant, if you're submitting through like grants.gov, for example, that can be really onerous. So, make sure this is basically saying if you need to create a login and username and password, that you've got that down. I know with grants.gov, when you're going after federal grants, you may need to be registered in SAM, or you may need to be have a DUNS number. So you want to make sure that you get all of those little tedious items out of the way before you start writing your proposal. Where you don't want to be is, you don't want to be in a position where you've spent like a lot of time working on your proposal, and then you're trying to, get these outlining things situated, and it puts you behind and you're not able to go for the opportunity. Okay, so that's enough on that. So going more into the budget, when you're putting together your budget, you want to make sure that you provide as much detail as possible. So you definitely want to work out the calculations, show your work, like your math teacher said when you were in school. They always would say, show your work. So show those calculations on your budget, so that the person reviewing the application can get a really good idea of how the money is being spent. And then you also want to provide descriptions for each item that you're requesting funding in. So if you're, for example, running a program and you're going to need several instructors, you want to make that very clear in your description. The other thing to keep in mind is to stay within your budget limits. So if the grant amount is for $50,000, make sure that your budget is for $50,000 or less, unless you plan on offsetting additional expenses, through your own internal resources. But you do want to make sure that you stay within the budget limits, because you want the funder to know that you won't go over budget and that this is something that is realistic for you. Another thing that you want to do is solidify matching fund requirements, and matching funds is something that is becoming more and more popular. A lot of times funders want to see that you have skin in the game. So, and that what that means is that they don't really feel comfortable giving unless they know that other organizations are giving to you as well. And so sometimes they'll say, you'll have to find a matching award for our award. And that could either be a matching cash donation or an in-kind donation from another funder. But if you do have that requirement, and that's not always a requirement, but I do see it a lot with government grants. So if you do have a matching fund requirement, you want to make sure that you get that taken care of, again, in this outlining phase. And then last but not least, I like to tell folks to not overwhelm their personnel category. So a lot of times, when you get a grant, you want the inclination is to spend the money on salaries, and that's totally fair. You have to keep your staff for sure. But I would say as a rule of thumb, to not have to not allocate more than 40% of your budget to personnel, just because you don't want to give the funder the impression that their funds are funding the salaries. You don't want to put them in that position. You want them to know that the funds are actually going into the program that you're working on and not just salaries. And you want them to feel like, if the grant goes away, these positions are going to go away and these folks are going to lose their jobs. So you basically want to show them that you do have the resources to sustain personnel even without the grant. Okay, so now we're going to get into the narrative portion. And this is the portion that folks tend to cringe at because this involves the actual writing. And it's the most important because this is what's going to determine whether or not you get the funding. So the advice that I like to give when it comes to writing out your narrative is making sure that you answer all of the questions accordingly. And then, don't skip over anything. Sometimes there are loaded questions with like multiple questions in one question. If you just write down every question on your outline and make sure you're addressing every question, and don't try to provide a blanket answer and assume that it's answering every question. So just be very detailed in that regard. And then once you've written down your narrative, and you've written down a response to each question, I would say to cross-reference what you wrote with the scoring section. So the example that I provided here is, on the left-hand side, you've got the questions. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the scoring criteria. So you want to make sure that, when you sit back and you read your response, that your response it addresses everything that they're going to be scoring you on. And that's a good way to just kind of ensure that you've covered every base and that you've addressed everything that they've asked you to address. It's kind of like backup. It's like, yeah, okay, so this is how they're going to be scoring it. So let me make sure that I've addressed each of these scoring points. Last but not least, I would say when you're writing your narrative, to avoid having too many cooks in the kitchen, quote unquote. So,
Generally, if you have a team of writers, even though they're all good writers in their own right, they may have different styles of writing. And the last thing you want is for your narrative to take on too many different tones and to sound like it's been written by various different people. So I would say limit your writers to maybe 1 to 2 writers and not to go above that. Okay, so next we have on the list is submission and tracking. So at this stage, you've put together your narrative and you've submitted your grant application. Congratulations, that was no easy feat. So once you've submitted your application, you want to make sure that you receive confirmation of receipt of your application, which you'll usually get, especially if you submit through a portal, you'll usually get an automatic reply saying, thanks for submitting your application. If you've submitted it through email and you don't receive a confirmation, it might not hurt to, send an email just to confirm that they have received it as well. Then you want to do a little debrief with your team. If it's just you alone, then obviously you won't have a big team. But if you're like a nonprofit with the team or something of that nature, just do a quick debriefing and talk about what went well, what you could have improved on, just so that you make the process more streamlined for other grant applications in the future. And then you want to debrief with the agency. So this would be in the case if you don't win the award. If you don't win the award, it's always a great idea to reach out to the agency or the foundation and ask them for a debriefing session. And that is very common. And they will give you information about where you could have improved or, how they came to their decision, and just be really mindful of that so that you can apply that feedback to the next round of applications. But aside from that, the last point I have here is hurry up and wait. And that is essentially saying that when you submit your application, I would say expect about a 30 to 45 day turnaround. And I know when we're submitting these applications, it's a big rush job. We have to get it out by the deadline. But then once it's submitted, you're kind of like waiting a lot of the time for a response. And it can take months. It might take 2 to 3 months to get a response, especially if it's a government grant. But usually they'll have that information outlined in the application and they'll let you know when to expect to hear back. So
that's always a great thing to know. Last but not least, your reporting. And so this comes into play once you've received the grant. Congratulations if you receive it, but your reporting is going to be just as important as you submitting the grant. And reporting basically ties into the whole compliance piece. So once you've submitted it, once you've been awarded it, you will be expected to send in reports, program reports, financial reports, and you just want to make sure that you're doing that in alignment with the schedule that's been given to you. So usually once you win a grant, the funder will reach out to you, they'll schedule a meeting with you and your team, and they will go over the calendar and the schedule for submitting reports. So you just want to make sure that you're mindful, take good notes at that point. And also, when you are in the process of working through the grant, make sure that you maintain organized files, have all of your expenses, in a folder, saved somewhere where you can easily access those things because you're always going to need them. And what I want to emphasize on the reporting aspect is this is very highly important when you receive a grant, because you don't want to receive the money and then fall off the face of the earth, because you want to apply for the money again in the future. You want to make this a multi-year award if you can. So really take the reporting aspect seriously when you're asked for things, when you're asked for narratives, when you're asked for financials. Make sure that you're taking that very seriously and that you're submitting that so that you can be reconsidered again for the next round of grants. Okay, so that is it in a nutshell. Those are the 5 ways that I like to use to leverage grant opportunities. I hope that you've learned something. Again, the Right Consulting Group is a boutique proposal management firm. We handle all things. So, a lot of times if you're working with a grant writing firm, they're just doing the grant writing, but we pride ourselves on working with you from the beginning to the end. So we can help you do the research. We can help you put together your pipeline. We help put together your narrative, your budget, submit it, and then we can even help you with the reporting piece on the back end. So we are there to be with you from beginning to end. We also offer curriculum development. We're a technical writing firm as well. So if you're working on a curriculum, a scholarship application, a resume, cover letter, or if you need some editing and proofreading services, we can provide that support as well. Here's my contact information, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions. You can also go to my website to schedule a consultation, and I appreciate it, and I look forward to working with you all in the future. And I welcome any questions at this point.
Okay, hi, Antionetta. Sorry, takes me a second. And so I am so excited that that you were able to provide this information. And so my question for you is, how much money have you cleared for people? Because you've told us what to do, but you can do this for us. And so this is not just you like pulling this out and how much money have you cleared?
Since we started in 2019, we've cleared over $1 million for nonprofits and small businesses. And I would say our average award amount is somewhere around $50K per award amount. So we're very seasoned. We know what the funders are looking for, what they're going to be scoring you on, and we really try to address those areas so to really maximize and make your proposal very strong. So we have a pretty decent track record that we're proud of.
Nice. So, all right, you have given us a tremendous amount of information. If you don't know this, you can be very overwhelmed, right, by the information you provided, because it's great information. It's okay. So we know that we need money.
Yes.
And I don't want to say I'm lazy, but I'm overwhelmed by the information. Like, like sometimes when you become overwhelmed, you can become paralyzed and like not be able to move because you can't even process what's being told to you. If we're in that state, what can we do?
You can give me a call, and This is very common for grant writing. It's something that can be extremely tedious. I mean, folks are so busy trying to run their organization or run their small business that having to sit down and go through these details can be very overwhelming. And so I would say it's very much worth the investment of working with a grant writer such as myself to take the stress off of your plate. So if you're in a pinch, if you know that you need to raise funds, but you don't have the capacity to do it,
Right.
I would say reach out to me and let me take that off your plate. That's what we're here for.
I know you've had, obviously you've cleared over $1 million and you've had several clients and blah, blah, blah. What is the one reoccurring theme? Like, is there one thing that like when you're talking to your clients that you're like, man, all my clients seem to have this issue? Is there like one thing that you're seeing?
I'm working with a lot of clients who have new organizations. And one thing that I didn't mention is that, if your organization has been around for centuries or decades or whatever, more than likely you're already well known and you have that name recognition. And so funders are going to be more willing to give to those sorts of organizations. But I come across a lot of clients who are just getting their organizations off the ground. They don't have a lot of past performance. And so that's a challenge for them. And what I like to recommend to them is to do a couple of things. First, get in front of the funder before you even submit an application. Don't send in a cold application. 9 times out of 10, your project probably won't be funded. But if you can, when you're doing your research, if you come across the name of the grants manager and you've got their contact information, I would say it's very beneficial to reach out to them, set up a 15-minute introduction call, let them know about your project and ask them, does my project align with your guidelines? And they'll be very honest with you. And if they say it does, and that's great, that means that you're on their radar. They're going to be looking for your proposal. The other thing I would recommend is partnering with another entity that has a similar mission to you, but that is a little bit more well-known. And you may have those places in mind because you may have modeled your organization or whatever after what they do. So reach out to those folks and say, hey, just make it mutually beneficial and say, we don't have a lot of experience, but we want to go after this grant. And if we get it, you can play this role, we can play this role, everybody wins, everybody eats. You've got it as past performance. And if you do that enough times, you can start to go after the opportunities on your own. So that's pretty common. It's just working with organizations that don't have a lot of past performance, but they have the passion, and just, working with them to build up that name recognition with the funder. And so yeah.
Thank you so much, Antionetta. Listen, if you want to get some money and you're interested in seeing what opportunities are available to you, please reach out to her. Her information is right there. Go on her website, check her out, give her a holler, and she will help you. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Thank you for being us, and we will talk soon. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.